There is no scream, no one collapsing to the floor, no dramatic scene of clutching the chest like you see in the movies. And yet, the heart is still stopping. A heart attack in women over 60 does not arrive like a storm. It comes like a wisp of smoke, silent, gentle, and almost invisible. Have you ever felt a little tired after standing at the sink to wash dishes for just a few minutes? Or felt a fleeting wave of nausea and assumed it was just because you ate dinner a bit too late? A touch of dizziness, a moment of unease, a night of restless sleep. And then you reassure yourself, it's probably just old age. But if I told you that nearly half of all heart attacks in American women occur without any chest pain, would you still dare to dismiss it so casually? Too many mothers, wives, sisters have passed away, leaving their families in shock. Not because they ignored their health, but because no one warned them. No one ever told them that unusual fatigue or breaking out in a cold sweat while resting could be the heart's way of screaming without making a sound. And here is the question for you. How many times have you felt something's not right, but brushed it aside? Or have you ever seen a loved one showing these signs and stayed silent thinking it's probably nothing? In this video, I will help you lift the veil over the most dangerous signs, the silent signals of the heart. Based on real data from the most trusted heart associations in America, this is not rumor. This is the kind of knowledge that can either save a life or take it away if you neglect it even once. Are you ready? Because all it takes is one moment of neglect, and that moment could be the last. Sign 1. Extreme fatigue without a clear reason. Have you ever found yourself completely exhausted after just a few minutes of folding laundry? Or your mother, who used to go to the market and clean the house, now has to sit down and rest halfway through washing the dishes? Many people assume that this is simply a normal part of aging. But if you feel a deep, unusual fatigue that forces you to collapse into a chair after doing only small daily tasks, do not dismiss it too quickly. This is not the kind of tiredness you feel after a long day of gardening. This is exhaustion without any clear explanation. Some people step outside just to pick up the mail and end up leaning against the wall, gasping for breath. Some fold a few towels and suddenly feel as if they've just climbed 3 flights of stairs. Does that sound familiar? In a study published by the American Heart Association, more than 40% of older women reported experiencing unusual, extreme fatigue in the days leading up to their heart attack, without ever having chest pain. No pain, no obvious shortness of breath, just fatigue. Fatigue so strange that even they themselves noticed something wasn't right. Do you see yourself in this, or your mother who keeps saying, "I'm just a little tired," but lately has had to sit down to rest again and again in the middle of tasks she once did with ease? Fatigue, when it is repeated, especially without any clear cause, is no longer just about age. It may be the first and only warning sign from the heart before it is too late. The problem is, no one collapses from feeling tired. People simply lie down to rest, then they get up and continue, and so they ignore it. But if that feeling lasts for several days, along with poor sleep, loss of appetite, or a gradual weakening without explanation, then it is no longer ordinary fatigue. It is something you need to check immediately, because the heart is working harder than usual, but you may not realize it at all. Are you certain your loved one is not going through this very thing right now? And if they are, do they really have enough time to wait for the next sign? Because sometimes the first warning sign is also the last. And the next sign is even easier to miss. A vague ache in the back or neck, something many women simply believe is a stiff joint from sleeping in the wrong position. Have you ever heard that in your own home? Sign 2. Back, neck, jaw, or arm pain. Mild, dull, but not normal. Have you ever woken up with a stiffness in the back of your neck and thought it must be from sleeping in the wrong position? Or perhaps someone in your family complained of back pain and you just told them to put on a patch or take a painkiller. The problem is, sometimes those aches that seem so ordinary are not ordinary at all. Women over 60 often do not experience the sudden, crushing chest pain that men do when having a heart attack. Instead, they may feel a dull ache in the middle of the back, behind the shoulders, in the neck, or spreading into the jaw. And because it is not intense, because it doesn't force them to stop what they are doing, many choose to ignore it. Let me tell you the story of Eleanor, 68 years old, living in Pennsylvania. One afternoon, while shopping at the supermarket with her granddaughter, she felt a mild soreness in her back, a discomfort stretching from her shoulders up to her neck. She thought it must have been from pushing a heavy shopping cart, but when she returned home, the soreness did not fade. Instead, it began to spread into her neck and down her left arm. Still no chest pain, still no feeling of being ill, but just a few hours later, she was rushed to the hospital for a mild heart attack. If she had not been taken in on time, the story could have ended very differently. Does that sound familiar? Has someone in your family ever said, "It's probably from lifting something heavy yesterday," or maybe it's just the weather changing, yet the ache lingers, dull and persistent? In surveys from retirement communities across the U.S., up to 40% of women reported unusual back or shoulder pain in the week before their heart attack, yet none of them thought of the heart. Why is that? Because this feeling does not match what we are told a heart attack should feel like. It's not sharp, not crushing, not life-threatening, just a mild soreness, so everyone assumes it will pass. But if that pain does not pass, if it keeps coming back, or appears alongside fatigue, nausea, or even a mild discomfort in the chest, you must stop. Not to rest, but to get your heart checked. Have you ever heard your mother complain about unexplained back pain? Or perhaps you yourself have felt it and thought, "Oh, it's just muscle pain." If so, then the real question is, can you be sure it won't come back? Can you be sure next time you'll still have enough time? Because the next warning sign is even harder to notice. A sensation that feels almost like coming down with the flu. So how do you tell the difference between a common flu and a silent cry for help from the heart? Sign 3. Nausea or flu-like symptoms. Have you ever felt sluggish, as if you were coming down with the flu, but without the fever, cough, or stuffy nose? Or maybe your mother once said, "I must have an upset stomach," when she felt nauseous even though she was eating normally. You might think it's just indigestion, but pause for a moment. Because sometimes the body doesn't warn you with obvious signals. It whispers through the most vague sensations. One of the most easily misunderstood warning signs of a silent heart attack in older women is exactly this: feeling as if you have a mild flu. A slight chill in the body, passing nausea, loss of appetite, or a sense of deep fatigue without any clear reason. These are symptoms most of us assume will simply go away. But according to a study in the United States, more than 40% of women over 60 experienced flu-like symptoms in the days before they were hospitalized for a heart attack. No chest pain, no racing heartbeat, just a sense that something felt off. And because it wasn't obvious, they took cold medicine, rested, drank warm tea. No one thought of the heart. Imagine this: a 64-year-old woman in Michigan went to the clinic because of persistent nausea with no clear cause. No fever, no vomiting, just a week-long feeling of being a little under the weather. When tested, doctors discovered she was in the middle of a silent heart attack. No one collapsed,
No one dialed 911. But had she waited just one more day, she might not have survived. Why is this so dangerous? Because many women, especially older women, are used to enduring discomfort, to hiding small signs of not feeling well, and only taking action when symptoms become obvious. But with heart disease, by the time it is obvious, it may already be too late. Do you live with someone who has been saying recently, "I just don't feel right, like I'm about to come down with the flu"? Are they really fighting a flu? Or is their body sending a subtler signal, one that only someone truly paying attention would recognize? And if you think nausea is just a minor symptom, wait for the next one: shortness of breath, even while sitting still and doing nothing at all. Could that be happening to someone you love right now?
Sign 4. Shortness of breath, even while resting. Have you ever seen your mother sitting quietly, yet still gasping for air? Or perhaps you yourself have walked from the bedroom to the kitchen and had to stop several times just to catch your breath. You may blame the weather, your age, or lack of exercise, but if you are becoming breathless during the smallest of tasks, don't assume it's normal. The feeling of shortness of breath when you are doing nothing, just sitting, talking, or watching television, is one of the silent yet serious warning signs of a heart attack in older women. The frightening part is that this symptom is often mistaken for aging, fatigue, anxiety, or lack of physical activity, and so it gets ignored. According to surveys conducted in American healthcare centers, as many as 43% of women over 60 reported experiencing breathlessness during daily activities, but most never went to see a doctor. They simply sat down, waited for the feeling to pass, but the heart does not wait. Imagine this: your mother used to go shopping, cook meals, and clean the house on her own. But lately, even cooking a simple dinner forces her to sit down and rest 3 times. No cough, no fever, no chest pain, just not enough air to breathe. Have you seen this before? Have you ever wondered if it could be a sign that the heart is failing to deliver enough blood, enough oxygen to sustain the body? Shortness of breath can easily be confused with other conditions like asthma or pneumonia. But if you notice it happening repeatedly without a clear reason and it doesn't improve with rest, do not take it lightly, because very likely it is the heart crying out for help, but no one is listening. Have you ever watched someone you love gradually slow down, walking less, speaking less, or even sitting still while still gasping for breath? Think again. It may not be that they are simply getting weaker, but that their heart is weakening day by day. And if shortness of breath already worries you, the next sign is even easier to mistake. Dizziness, lightheadedness, that sudden sensation you might fall just from standing up off the sofa. Have you ever seen someone you love go through that?
Sign 5. Dizziness or lightheadedness. Have you ever stood up from a chair and suddenly felt the whole room spin? That loss of balance, as if you had to sit back down immediately to avoid falling? Many people assume it's due to low blood pressure, lack of sleep, or simply getting older. But sometimes it is an early warning sign that the heart is failing to send enough blood to the brain, a signal you should never ignore. Especially in women over 60, dizziness, particularly when changing positions, is not always just a normal issue. It may be the heart's way of telling you it is growing weaker, that the blood flow is no longer strong enough to reach the brain and keep you steady on your feet. A U.S. medical report showed that after the age of 55, the rate of dizziness upon standing increases significantly, especially in women. What's even more alarming is that this symptom is often mistaken for hormonal imbalance, inner ear disorders, or worse, ignored altogether. Let me share with you a real story. A 63-year-old woman living in the suburbs. She was healthy, living her daily life as usual, except that sometimes when she stood up from the sofa, her vision went dark for a moment. She thought it was just the heat,
but after it happened several times in 1 week, her family convinced her to see a doctor. The result? Mild coronary artery blockage. Fortunately, it was discovered early, allowing her to avoid a dangerous heart attack just months later. You see, losing your balance is not always harmless. When the heart cannot pump enough blood to the brain, you experience lightheadedness, that dizzy floating sensation, the feeling of nearly collapsing. And if this happens repeatedly, it is no longer a small issue. Have you ever seen your mother stagger slightly as she walked out of her room? Or a loved one say, "I just feel like my head is spinning today"? Do not dismiss it. Do not say, "It's probably just because I didn't sleep well last night." Take it for what it really is, a warning, one that the body is desperately trying to send before it's too late. Because sometimes what makes you fall is not a slippery floor, but a heart quietly growing weaker in silence. And if dizziness already leaves you uneasy, the next sign is even harder to define, a vague sense of dread, a feeling that something bad is about to happen, even if you don't know why. Have you ever felt that way before?
Sign 6. Anxiety or a vague sense of dread. Have you ever felt restless inside without knowing why? Not because of family worries, not because of work pressure. Yet your heart races, you can't sleep, and there's this unsettling feeling, as if something is wrong, waiting just ahead. You might not be able to name it, but your body is trying to tell you something very clear. In recent years, more and more cardiologists have noted a kind of emotional warning that appears before a heart attack, especially in older women. It may come as unexplained anxiety, a vague sense of unease, or sudden changes in sleep patterns without any specific reason. According to a 2022 survey in New York, nearly 30% of women over 55 who were hospitalized for a heart attack said they had felt anxious, restless, or unable to sleep in the days leading up to it. No one thought it had anything to do with the heart. No one told them that even a gut feeling could be a physiological warning. Why does this happen? Because the nervous system and the heart are deeply connected. When the heart begins to strain, blood circulation becomes unstable, the nervous system reacts first, creating feelings of unease, palpitations, or anxiety even when nothing stressful is happening. It is not because you are overthinking, it is a survival instinct. Have you ever heard someone say, "I don't know why, but I just feel uneasy today"? Or perhaps your mother spent several nights unable to sleep for no clear reason at all, and then, weeks later, ended up in the hospital with a serious heart problem. That is not coincidence. The problem is, very few people trust such feelings. They fear being called paranoid, weak, or imagining things. But what if that is the body's last attempt to speak before it's too late? Have you ever felt that way yourself? If you have, don't ignore it. And if your loved one has been losing sleep, feeling heavy-hearted, or unable to breathe calmly for days on end, listen to them. Because the last thing you want is to say, "I should have taken her to the doctor sooner." And if a vague sense of dread can be a sign from the heart, then the next sign makes it even harder to stay indifferent. Sudden cold sweats, appearing out of nowhere, even while resting. Do you know what is really happening in those moments?
Sign 7. Cold sweats, especially while at rest. Have you ever seen someone, your mother, your wife, sitting quietly reading a book or watching television, when suddenly sweat begins pouring down as if they had just been walking under the hot sun? No fever, no physical activity, just cold sweat breaking out, making them shiver, and then they simply shake their head and say, "It must be the weather." That could be the sign of a silent heart attack coming very close. Cold sweats are the body's reaction when the sympathetic nervous system is triggered because the heart is under extreme strain. It doesn't require exertion, it doesn't require running or exercise. All it takes is your heart beginning to cry out for help. A study in the United States found that nearly 40% of women admitted to the hospital for a heart attack had experienced cold sweats beforehand, especially at night or while resting. But because there was no dramatic chest pain like in the movies, they didn't call for help. They simply wiped off the sweat and tried to fall back asleep. I want you to remember the story of Amanda, a woman in her 60s with no history of heart disease. One evening, as she was sitting reading, she suddenly felt a chill down her spine and sweat pouring down her body. No fever, no flu, no exertion, yet that was the first and only warning before she was hospitalized with a heart attack just hours later. What might have happened if she hadn't been treated in time? The most dangerous part is this. No one thinks cold sweats have anything to do with the heart. People blame panic, stress, or the weather. But if you are at rest, in an air-conditioned room, with no reason at all for sweat to break out, that means your body is reacting to a critical emergency inside. Have you ever seen a loved one wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, gasping for breath, and saying, "I must have slept in the wrong position"? Do not dismiss it, because that night could be the very last chance you have to act. And now you may be asking yourself, if I or someone I love experience several of these signs at once, what should I do? Wait and see, or trust my instincts and act immediately? The answer lies in the next part.